Today we're going to kick off our second summer series called GM Report Cards, where we look at analyze all 31 NHL GMs around the league, take a look at their trades, signings, and drafting record over the past year, and give them a grade for their work. We're kicking things off with Marc Bergevin and the Montreal Canadiens, and that's coming up next. Welcome back here to Top Shelf Hockey. Welcome back to this brand new series that we're kicking off here called GM Report Cards, where we take a look at all GMs and grade them on their work here for the past year. This new series will run side by side with our other offseason series called Top Prospect Review, where we take a look at all the top 5 prospects for all 31 NHL teams. This will provide some different and fresh content here for the offseason as we anxiously await October and the new season to get underway. So let's get started by reviewing the work here of GM Marc Bergevin over the past 12 months. So I'm going to go back to the beginning of the last season, basically around training camp. We're going to get started by taking a look at his trading record. Then we're going to look at his signings and drafting records for the past year as well. And you're definitely going to want to stay tuned until the end, where I give you my grade for Marc Bergevin on his work for the past 12 months. Getting things started here with his trading record. Obviously, things really kicked off last September when he made the big trade for captain Max Pacioretty, which had been rumored for quite a long period of time. And as we get ready to open training camp, we saw a couple of Canadian cities trade their captains, including Montreal and Ottawa. Now, of course, Max Pacioretty was traded to the Vegas Golden Knights for Thomas Tatar, Nick Suzuki, and a 2019 second-round pick, which has turned out to be the number 50th overall selection, where they used that to select Samuel Fagemo. So obviously, this return right now is looking pretty good for Montreal. Thomas Tatar had an excellent first season. Nick Suzuki looks like a legitimate top prospect who has legitimate top 6 forward written all over him. Hopefully he will fulfill that, but right now he's looking really solid, and this draft pick looks decent as well so far. And of course, Max Pacioretty didn't have the greatest year in Vegas. Like, it wasn't horrendous, but certainly not up to those old 35 to 40 goal standards that he was setting in Montreal the years prior before we started to see some decline here before he was traded. So obviously right now I must say it was a bold move trading his captain, and I must say though I am a fan of the trade. I do like the return, so we're going to give him a good grade for that one. Of course, not long after, on October the 1st, he traded for Brett Kulak from the Calgary Flames, and he gave up Renat Valiev and Matt Teormina. So obviously Brett Kulak's not a huge piece, but he's a nice depth defenseman. He's proven pretty valuable last year as well, and for what they gave up for him, another great move here by Marc Bergevin. We also saw another trade in February where he acquired Jordan Weal from the Arizona Coyotes in exchange for Michael Chaput. Obviously, this deal has worked out relatively well so far, too. I mean, Chaput's a player who likely wasn't going to crack the Habs lineup, and Jordan Weal's been a nice addition. Afterwards, he did sign Weal to an extension at $1.75 million. So obviously, Jordan Weal is a player who did bounce around a little bit, but I do like his upside. I do like his potential, and the fact that he gave up a player who likely wasn't going to play in Montreal longer term to get him, really, I'll give him a good grade for that trade as well. On the trading front, things were kind of quiet until we get past the NHL Draft, getting ready to head into free agency, where we saw him trade Andrew Shaw back to the Chicago Blackhawks, along with a 2021 7th-round selection, and in return get 3 draft picks, including a 2020 second-round pick, a 2020 7th-round pick, and a 2021 third-round pick. So literally that Shaw trade was really pretty much a cap dump, but at the same time, he did recoup a fair bit of draft picks. When he acquired Shaw in the first place, that's what he mainly had given up, was multiple picks to bring him to Montreal, and then he got multiple picks back to send him back to Chicago. So again, overall, I mean, I did like Andrew Shaw's game last year, and that missing element that he provides, like that gritty factor, it might be missing from the Habs lineup, but the fact that they needed to kind of create some space, I do like this deal for Montreal as well. And then not long after that, they did trade Nick Delorier to the Anaheim Ducks in exchange for a 2020 4th-round pick. Again, another cap dump. Now, of course, as you remember, all this was kind of going on while Marc Bergevin was trying to make a bold move and sign Sebastian Aho to an offer sheet. So they were trying to create some necessary space to do that, as well as look after some of the other restricted free agents that they had to look after this year. And really, he did sign it, but unfortunately the Hurricanes matched, and he was not able to land Aho. But overall, he was certainly bold this summer. I'll give him kudos for trying, even though the offer sheet was a little weak. I mean, from that part of it, I would give the offer sheet itself probably like a C grade, because it really wasn't all that strong. It does front load it with lots of bonuses, which probably isn't the easiest thing for the Hurricanes to choke down, but at the same time, they certainly matched it. I think he would have had to go a little bit higher and be willing to give up a little bit more compensation before he really would have stood a good chance to bring that player to Montreal. But I'll give him some credit for trying, just not the best attempt on the offer sheet, even though it was signed. I think Aho just kind of used that to get the deal done to remain in Carolina, as he probably figured the Hurricanes would match a contract of that magnitude. Now let's jump over and take a look at the contracts that he's put together here in the last year as well. Taking a look at this past year, obviously he signed a combination of UFAs, RFAs, and he also signed some prospects, an undrafted one, as well as some guys that he had drafted but went through the college system in the U.S. Obviously, if you take a look at some unrestricted free agents, he brought in Nick Cousins this year in a 1-year, $1 million deal. Nice depth signing there for Montreal. He brought in the left shot defenseman Ben Sherratt on a 3-year contract at $3.5 million. He'd been coming off some pretty solid years in Winnipeg, so I do like that addition. He also signed Phil Varone, who's most likely going to play a lot in the American Hockey League, but is a call-up option. He's been up and down between the NHL and AHL over the last number of years, bounced around to a fair bit number of teams, but really he is a guy who, when given the opportunity, can be like a fourth-line player if you run into injuries, but he can also be a big help to your American Hockey League team as well. So again, a decent signing there, pretty low risk. And of course, they also addressed their backup goaltending concerns by signing veteran Keith Kincaid. I wasn't sure that they'd have the confidence going into the season, but the current tandem of Carey Price and Charlie Lindgren, since we already saw other backup goaltender Antti Niemi depart and head back to Europe, so obviously the Kincaid fills that need, provides that insurance, and he was given a pretty decent contract as well, a 1-year deal at $1.75 million as an unrestricted free agent. Of course, he spent time with New Jersey, got traded to Columbus, and then over to Montreal as a UFA here. So I must say, I'm happy with the signings. He didn't go out and do anything wild and crazy, any big ridiculous contracts. He addressed what the team needed through backup goaltending, left shot defensemen, and some depth forwards by some low risk signings. So overall, I'm pretty happy with Bergevin's work when it comes to addressing the UFAs. Now, as far as RFA goes, he signed guys like Charles Hudon, Michael McCarron, Joel Armia. RFA forward Arturi Lehkonen get a 2-year deal at $2.4 million. And of course, Armia got $2.6. I think both those contracts are pretty reasonable. When it comes to McCarron and Hudon, personally, I would have let them go. I don't see them being a regular member of the roster in Montreal anytime soon. I don't think they're going to cut it. They're both turning out to be guys that are likely never going to be regular NHL players, in my opinion. I would have either decided to try to trade them or to not bother going down to qualifying offer, just let them become a UFA and find another team if they're able to. I just don't see them being a part of the future, so I probably would dock a little bit of points for bringing them back, but there's really no risk involved. I just think that those contracts might be better put to use, but they should be, very least, be players who can play in the American Hockey League. But I guess time will tell what happens to them this year. I just don't see them getting a roster spot. Of course, Marc Bergevin also came to terms with some other prospects. Of course, a couple of these guys he drafted while we're playing U.S. college hockey, and that's goaltender Caden Primo and forward Ryan Poehling. Of course, Poehling got into an NHL game at the end of last year and started off with a tremendous result here, getting a hat trick as well as a shootout goal to win the game. He had a terrific first NHL game, one to remember, one for the ages. Doesn't mean that he's going to be a major mega offensive star. I mean, he very well might surprise some people, but most of us kind of have him pegged as being like a middle six type of forward. He does have some offensive upside. I just don't want fans to get too overexcited here and think he's going to be a 40-50 goal scorer, because more than likely he won't be. Maybe he'll surprise us and be more offensive than we thought, but I do see him being a pretty solid player. Just not going to be that offensive juggernaut that he kind of showed that he had the potential to be in that one game. But just remember, it's one game. But either way, and Caden Primo as well potentially could be the goalie of the future. I could see him being the backup to Carey Price probably in a year or two's time after getting some seasoning in the American Hockey League. And he very well could take over once they're ready to part with guys like Kincaid and Lindgren here at the NHL level. Backup Price, kind of learn the ropes and eventually see if he could be the starter. But he was a 7th round pick. He's quite a draft steal and really has a ton of potential here as well. And of course, they also signed Joel Teasdale as well from the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League, who went undrafted and really had a really solid ending to his junior career and could turn out to be a pretty good prospect as well. Let's take a look at their 2019 NHL draft record. If you look at the Habs draft from 2019, I must say overall they did a pretty solid job. Even last year was pretty good as well. I know last year in the 2018 first round, he did raise some eyebrows by taking the Jesperi Kotkaniemi, but so far he's looking like a pretty solid player who was, might fit in well with them. We'll see if they, down the road, I guess it's really too early to tell if they they picked the right guy or not. I mean, obviously, some guys that came after Kotkaniemi might prove to be better prospects longer term. I mean, that's what many projected through the draft, but I guess we'll see. Either way, he was addressing a positional need that the team had, and at one point, the Habs were really lacking prospects in the center position, and now they have a number of them. So I think he's done well with addressing that need, and even though that pick last year was maybe questionable to some, so far it's working out for him. But in the 2019 NHL Draft, even though 14 other teams passed him over, he did not pass up the chance to grab Cole Caulfield, who was an absolute goal-scoring machine in the United States National Team Development Program. He's going to be playing college hockey for a couple of years probably, or at least one before he signs pro. So we'll see how that goes, but really Caulfield has been breaking records scoring goals, but he is really small, which is why I think a lot of teams shied away from him. But Marc Bergevin is not doing that at all. He grabbed the chance. He took the chance to draft him, and as we know, the Montreal Canadiens are not afraid to have a smaller team, which they quite often have done. Small with speed has typically been a type of team that they've had quite often, and really for the most part, they've had a decent amount of success that way. And I can see Caulfield being a player who really fits in quite nicely with their systems and has a ton of success there. I certainly am surprised he fell down as far as he did. I thought for sure he'd be in the top 10, absolutely. But I guess other teams had concerns and were addressing other needs through other draft players here. But taking a look at their other picks, they took a bunch of defensemen. Obviously, the left side especially has been weak, and they took a bunch of them here. They get Jaden Struble as well, defenseman from St. Sebastian's U.S. High School. They got Matthias Norlander, who was a Swedish defenseman, in the third round. They had another third round pick at 77, where they took Gianni Fairbrother, who's another defenseman from the WHL's Everett Silvertips. They took Jacob Laguerriere as well, a defenseman from the Sioux Greyhounds in the Ontario Hockey League in the 5th round. Rhett Pitlick as well, a left winger out of Minnesota High School. They took Frederick Nielsen, goaltender out of Denmark. You can see they took a few more forwards and another defenseman in the 6th and 7th round as well. So they certainly knew their areas of weakness and they addressed it accordingly. And that's what GMs really need to do. Sometimes GMs go about things and try to hit that home run with that big free agent contract. And as we've seen time and time again, July the 1st is when most GMs make majority of their mistakes. And I don't think we can say Marc Bergevin has really done that. We haven't seen the Montreal Canadiens go out and sign a huge name free agent with a mega contract. Really, obviously this past year or really anytime recently. So Marc Bergevin, I think, did the safe approach. As we've seen last year, the Montreal Canadiens had a pretty solid year and just barely missed the playoffs. I think Marc Bergevin knows he's got a pretty good base there. They just needed to add a little bit more depth. The left side defense was a concern. Backup goaltending was a concern. They drafted appropriately to fill some of those needs longer term. They addressed their free agent needs by getting some reasonable contracts, depth players. We saw their RFA contracts come back pretty reasonable as well. So the only thing I probably would kind of mark down against his grade a little bit was I would have let Hudon and McCarron go. Otherwise, I think Marc Bergevin's done a great job. Now, I will admit in the past, I've been hard on Marc Bergevin and haven't been a fan of a lot of his trades and other signings in the past. But over the last year or two, he's certainly starting to win me over and has done a great job, I think, at least in the past calendar year. I'm giving him a grade of an A. I wouldn't give him an A+ because nobody's perfect, and there's some of these deals I think just could have been a little better. But overall, I've been very pleased with his pick. Now, obviously, as I release videos on all these other teams, you'll see I didn't give out too many A's when grading the general managers. So for this past year, I think Marc Bergevin has done one of the best jobs around the NHL. So of course, as always, I want to know what you think down in the comment section. What do you think of the job of Marc Bergevin for the past year between his drafting, his trading, and the signings he's made? Has he done a great job? How would you grade this GM over the past 12 months? If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content. And give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it as well. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.